Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today we're gonna do yet another pros and cons video, this time for Cattleya Orchids. Thank you guys so much for all of your comments and supportive comments towards this series. You guys really liked it when we did it with the Phalaenopsis orchid, which, by the way, I'll link it down below in case you missed that video. So yay, I'm happy I did something you liked. And as per your request, here is the continuation of this series. Today we will talk about the pros and cons of growing Cattleya orchids in a home. So these are the advantages and disadvantages that I encountered, struggled with, and if some of my cons don't apply to you or they're pros for you, that is great. It's just my experience, and of course you're welcome to share your experience, pros and cons with Cattleyas down below in the description in a comment. So without further ado, let us start with the pros of growing Cattleya orchids in a home. So first of all, the first pro is the thing that I enjoy most about Cattleya orchids, and this is complete variety. You can find Cattleyas of all colors, and more than that, more colors than you would actually find on some other orchids. Orange Oncidiums or orange Phalaenopsis, the way a Cattleya can display this color, are very rare. When was the last time you saw a pure solid color orange Oncidium? I'm not sure if you can remember it. With Cattleyas is really not uncommon, and not only orange, pure golden yellows, reds. Again, when was the last time you saw a pure red on a Phalaenopsis or even an Oncidium? Pretty rare, right? Well, Cattleyas certainly display this color. Not to mention, you can have combinations of these colors. You can have fiery red Cattleyas, orange combined with purple combined with yellow. All the combinations you can actually imagine. There has to be a hybrid in this world to match that description. Of course, you will find the purples, the pinks, whites, and all of those common colors except black, because black orchids are really rare. Other than that though, they can play around with color like nothing else. I also have a green Cattleya. Did you ever have a green Phalaenopsis or Oncidium? Yet again, I doubt it. So from the point of view of color, there is such great variety. I think one of the largest variety in the orchid world that you can find on a single family of orchids. But wait, there's more. Not only color variety and pattern variety, but also size and shape variety. There are Cattleya orchids which I like to call more floofy. They have a more wavy, big and curly, let's say, aspect to them, both with the petals but also with the lip. The lip is actually the centerpiece of the Cattleya orchid more than any other orchid. The lip can have a totally different color and pattern and shape from the petals and sepals. The orchid that you see in front of you has pretty straight and pretty simple sepals and petals, but look at this lip. It's wavy, it's fringy, it has a totally different color, and that is very common with Cattleya orchids. Yet again, variety in shape and in size. You can have Cattleyas which have thinner petals and sepals if that's your thing, or smaller lips, but also you can have Cattleyas with broad and fluffy lips, and it's just such a variety, it's hard to put in words. And not only flower variety, but also size variety. On the market you can find very tall Cattleyas that occupy a lot of space and have very long leaves, but also you can find medium-sized and even miniature-sized Cattleya orchids. There is again a lot of variety with foliage and with size, so if you don't have a lot of space in your house, there has to be a Cattleya which will fit. So when it comes to variety, I am not sure how many orchids can beat this orchid. Maybe the Oncidiums with their intergenerics, but from the point of view of variety, size, color, shape, there's something for everybody here. If you have a lot of space, go for a Laelia purpurata. She's big, she's showy, but if you don't have that much space, you can definitely find medium-sized, smaller-sized Cattleya orchids. You just have to look for them. And not only do we have complete and complex variety, we have complex intergenerics. Now, as I was saying, under the Cattleya family, there are quite a few genuses that look, let's say, a little bit similar to the Cattleyas, but you also have quite a few species that are very related to Cattleya orchids, such as epidendrums or brassivolas. Now, the good thing with these orchids, even though they're not proper Cattleyas, or I wouldn't really classify them as Cattleyas just so we don't confuse ourselves, they can actually be hybridized with Cattleyas. and what results is usually amazing. Hybridizing Brassavolas with Cattleyas brings a new type of fragrance, a nighttime fragrance to the hybrids, not to mention the variety, the shape, the color, and whatever goodness the Brassavolas can pass. Also, if you mix them with epidendrums, you can get beautiful, unbelievable shapes from these orchids. So not only you have that really huge variety that I talked about at the beginning, but you also have variety of the, let's say, family itself. You can find so many intergenerics that look so different among them that there's always something for everybody within this family. Next pro with Cattleyas, you can have good availability in nurseries or in shops that do sell something else rather than Phalaenopsis orchids. Even the no-ID Cattleya orchids are absolutely wonderful on the market. And even if most Cattleyas can be purchased in specialized nurseries, you can usually choose from many colors, many shapes, many sizes, and so on. If you want something a little bit more specific, say you want a Cattleya Orchids purpurata, you might not find it the moment you want it, but surely if you look in nurseries, I'm sure you will find it. So as far as I'm concerned, even if in nurseries Cattleya orchids are really well represented, if you go to a nursery and search for a Cattleya, most probably you will find a lot of hybrids to choose from. Some you might already know, some you might not know. There are just so many hybrids that I personally don't know. White, yellow, purple, red, whatever, you can find a whole lot of Cattleyas all together at the same time available for purchase. And to top off the good news, Cattleya orchids generally are not expensive orchids. I wouldn't say they're necessarily the same price as Phalaenopsis, because with phals prices can go really low. But even with Cattleya orchids you can find very affordable prices. Yet again, some hybrids or varieties can go for a little more, but generally you wouldn't have to save up for months and months and months just to get a Cattleya orchid or a Cattleya hybrid. Or if you find one of these no-ID hybrids, which are absolutely wonderful, in flower shops or garden centers, yet again, it's not all that expensive. So looking at it in the general view and comparing prices to other orchids, they're not very expensive, depending on the variety and hybrid, but certainly they are affordable, especially the complex hybrids and the no-ID hybrids. But now let's get to the good part. Cattleya orchids are just very extremely easy to care for. They're absolutely suited in a home because they absolutely don't care about humidity. I feel like Phalaenopsis care a little bit more than Cattleyas. With these orchids you can go quite dry in your environment. The species, the Cattleya species, usually or most of them come from droughty conditions, very hot conditions. The majority of them don't come from the cloud forest, so you don't have to use mists and humidifiers and all of that to grow Cattleyas. Many orchid growers grow Cattleyas outside on their porch in the summertime in the full heat, and everything is perfectly fine if the orchid receives hydration and water. Other than that, do not bother with humidity with these orchids. They really don't care all that much about it. I've never had complaints or Cattleyas growing weird in very low humidity, as long as they're hydrated. So from this point of view, they're absolute queens. Also, they are very drought tolerant, so if you don't have time to water today, that's perfectly fine in most cases. You can water tomorrow. Even if a Cattleya orchid gets a little dehydrated, you will see those pseudobulbs shrivel a little bit. Well, don't worry, if the roots are still okay, and chances are they're okay if you didn't disturb them, you can hydrate that Cattleya, no problem. Another pro is the growth rate with Cattleya orchids. Unlike Phalaenopsis, which have a season, many Cattleyas, and especially the hybrids or no-ID hybrids, don't have a season. They can bloom throughout the year whenever they feel like it. Well, not really whenever they feel, whenever a new cane or pseudobulb matures. And that, depending on the hybrid, can be multiple times a year. And not only that, you can have multiple directions of growth from the rhizome. Therefore, you can have 1, 2, 3, 4 canes maturing in a few months, and if those canes are healthy and you took care of your orchid properly, they will bloom and you will have such a wonderful display. And here I'm going to mention the BC St. Andre, which is an intergeneric. That orchid grows very fast and can bloom quite a few times a year if you have enough sunshine and enough warmth. And the last pro that I'm going to talk about, I'm sure some people don't care about this, but it's really important for me, it's fragrance. When I discovered Cattleya orchids and the variety and moreover the fragrance that they have, I just flipped. They're one of my favorite families. Cattleya orchids can have beautiful, flowery, spicy, citrusy fragrances. They're absolutely wonderful. And moreover, most of them are fragrant, even the no ID hybrids that you find on the market. My best smelling Cattleya orchids have to be the no ID hybrids. Wonderful, out of this world fragrance that I just want everybody to experience it. So in my book, this is a major pro that many Cattleyas have. Now, of course, you can find Cattleyas without a fragrance, and I do have some of those in my collection as well. They can compensate, but many hybrids, or the majority of them, do have a wonderful, usually flowery fragrance that is not really repulsive or offending to the vast majority of people. So that shall conclude my pros list, but feel free to add. And now let's talk about the cons, because if you think these girls are perfect, oh no, they're not. Okay, so the biggest con, in my opinion, is availability. Yes, I discuss about the fact that if you go to an orchid nursery, you will find so much variety there. Yes, keywords, orchid nursery. Flower shops and garden centers, oh no. In my previous video with Phalaenopsis orchids, I told you that no matter the flower shop or where you go, a place that sells plants, you will most probably find a Phalaenopsis. White one, pink one, doesn't matter. I cannot say the same thing about Cattleyas, and there are several reasons for this. One of the main reasons is that Cattleya orchids cannot be tricked into blooming. Phalaenopsis orchids usually are tricked with lower temperatures, imitating the arrival of fall. You can imitate the fall all you want with a Cattleya orchid. If the growth is not mature, if her rhythm is not met, she will not bloom. Therefore, Cattleya orchids are more of a seasonal thing. Usually I find Cattleyas in shops here in the warmer season, but not only, in autumn as well. And since there is such variety with Cattleya orchids, even with the complex hybrids, you cannot really estimate when they will bloom. Therefore, you cannot ship 1,000 orchids all in bloom to a flower shop. And as we all know, flower shops can only sell flowers if they're in bloom. If you sell a Cattleya without bloom, you'll sell it at a discount. So sorry, no can do. Cattleya orchids are not the type of plants that have season bloomings, or that can be tricked into blooming and that can be sold by your typical commercial flower shop. The result of that is that we cannot always buy Cattleya orchids, even if not in bloom, whenever we feel like it. We need to go to a specialized nursery most of the time, or take to the internet and see what online nurseries we have available in our area. The second con is that blooms don't last all that long on Cattleya orchids. Yet another reason why flower shops and garden centers don't have Cattleyas all the time. The blooms are actually pretty sensitive, and if you move them around too much, especially the buds, you might have some blasting. And if I didn't have a comparison term with the Phalaenopsis, which blooms for months and months and reblooms and all of that, maybe I wouldn't put this as a con, because in the orchid world, most orchids don't last as long in bloom as Phalaenopsis. The phals are just queens, they're complex hybrids, and no matter how much you cross a Cattleya with whatever you want, you cannot obtain 3 months long blooming times from singular flowers. So that's another con. I have to say I'm not necessarily bothered by it because I just appreciate the plant itself. But in the overall scheme of things, yes, that is definitely a con. If I didn't have the Phalaenopsis with their long-lasting blooms, I wouldn't even bother mentioning it. But since we do, we have to mention it. We have to give credit to the phal and a little bit of discredit to the Cattleya. Another con, yet again, just because of the Phalaenopsis, but not really, the Oncidium as well, is the flower display. Cattleya orchids are not known for the spectacular show of blooms. You will not find 1 meter long flower spikes on Cattleyas. You will not even find, 40 centimeter long flower spikes, unless we're talking about Schomburgkia hybrids or even Laelia hybrids, Laelia anceps. But those are just singular cases. The vast majority of Cattleyas have pretty short flower spikes, and the vast majority of them create 2, 3, 4 flowers at a time. You also have the cluster Cattleyas, which create multiple blooms, yes, but they're not as showy when you put them together with the Phalaenopsis. You remember the beautiful cascades that Phalaenopsis can do? Cattleyas cannot do that. Their most abundant display is a sort of cluster that sits upon an upright spike, most of the times. So when it comes to showiness, I am not sure if you would put a Cattleya at your wedding unless you really like orchids and Cattleyas. But for the average person who wants a beautiful display of whatever flowers are pretty, Cattleyas are not the way to go. So from this point of view, when it comes to the bloom display, Cattleyas are lacking, sadly, in comparison to Phalaenopsis, but not only, in comparison to Oncidiums as well. Another con, yet again, because of the Phalaenopsis, Cattleyas do not rebloom from old canes that already bloomed. Not only that, they don't bloom from canes that are 2 or 3 years old anyway. So what you will be left in time is with a whole bunch of pseudobulbs or canes which cannot bloom ever again, or ever for that matter. So you can have, like on my display here, one single bloom and then a whole bunch of leaves and pseudobulbs which, if you're not a true orchid fan, you will not appreciate. You'll be, okay, so now what? What do I do with this? Can I cut it off? I mean, just for a flower, all of this? I can understand how that can be a con. Yet again, because I am such a passionate orchid lover, I'm okay with that. I can get over that. But think about the average person who just wants to have a flower in their home. You have a whole greenery here for a bloom. That's not even all that showy comparison to Phalaenopsis orchids. So that can be another con, the fact that the older pseudobulbs, once bloomed or once too mature or too old, they will not bloom again. So what do? Do we cut them off? Not a great idea if the orchid doesn't have enough pseudobulbs, because these are storage organs. The orchid stores nutrients and water in them, so it's not a good idea to just remove them just because we don't like them. So that's a pickle to some people and a downside. Another con is that Cattleyas depend on bright light. And yes, they are very suited for home growing, but let's say for those homes which have a bright window. If you, however, try to grow a Cattleya orchid in Phalaenopsis light, in artificial light, on your desk at work, it's probably not gonna work. The orchid might not bloom at all, actually, and the growth will be extremely slow. These are highlight plants, so they will appreciate filtered sunlight or even direct sunshine in the morning or in the afternoon whenever it's not hot. But most of the times you should kind of provide filtered sunshine. They are one of those iconic highlight plants, and even though not all Cattleyas appreciate very high light, most of them do, and the most complex intergenerics that you sometimes find in flower shops or garden centers, they appreciate bright light. So if your home doesn't have a window with direct sunshine, your journey with Cattleyas might not be as fulfilling, sadly. And that can be a con for many people who don't have a very, very bright home. And the last con that I will talk about, setback. Setback takes years. Phalaenopsis orchids, yet again I'm comparing them, but I have to, they can bounce back from root rot or even crown rot within a year. You can have a little keiki, basil keiki, which starts a flower spike within a year. With Cattleyas, you will not have that. They are pretty much limited to the energy they have stored, to their growth rhythm. You can have Cattleyas which only grow one new cane per year, and if the orchid loses her roots, and by the way, Cattleyas are very, very, very prone to losing roots, then you have setback. You have an orchid which is stressed, which will create tinier structures and will take some time until it finally reaches a comfortable state to bloom. Well, this period can take years, depending on the Cattleyas. In very extreme cases, it can take 2 to 3 years until you'll have another bloom on your orchid. And yet again, if you're not a true orchid lover, that will be a major downer. Just imagine having this without any blooms for years on your shelf. I'm not sure if you'd like this or a fern, to be honest. Ferns are prettier looking. So for the average person, this is not good news. For us orchid growers, you know, it's no big deal. We can wait, but really it's a downer, even for me. And the first time that I set back one of my Cattleyas and I observed the tiny, tiny, tiny growths, I was like, oh, I'm in for a long journey now, am I? I was. I don't appreciate this, but what can we do? Alrighty guys, this has been the video for today. These are my pros and cons with Cattleya orchids growing in normal home conditions. If you have more to add, let us know down below what is your opinion. I'm sure everybody has their own beefs with particular orchids, but you know what? At the end of the day, we do love them because that's why we keep them. There isn't such a thing as the perfect orchid. We cannot create them just how we want. They are a part of nature. Even if we hybridize and rehybridize them, we cannot change their core genes, can we? So alrighty guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this, and you know the drill. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!